Fiancé joked about my looks before wedding. Mom reveals shocking truth. 5-year relationship ends after cruel bar joke and hidden crush partner's doubts explode into betrayal. Full story with updates. After being in a relationship for 5 full years, my partner suddenly said he wasn't certain about tying the knot. Then he cracked a mean joke to his buddies that if I looked better, he'd commit right away, and soon after. His mother rang me up sobbing about Dominic and something big. We've been a couple for slightly more than 5 years, betrothed for the past 8 months. We connected via common acquaintances at a homewarming event, 2 individuals bonding over a mutual dislike for craft beers and adoration for old animated shows. Our bond advanced at a relaxed tempo, courting for 12 months, sharing a home after 24, welcoming our feline companion Beans at 36, and becoming a fiancé the prior season. The engagement moment wasn't lavish, simply a weekend-dawn trek to our preferred vantage spot where he clumsily pulled the jewelry container from his jacket. I accepted instantly. We chose this fall for the ceremony and have been gradually organizing all aspects, mostly me handling details while he agreed passively. Roughly 3 months back, Dominic began uttering strange remarks during marriage discussions, nothing overtly bad, just unsure. When I presented possible locations, he'd remark stuff like that's a big expense for a single occasion, or do we truly require all those guests? I dismissed it as standard male attitude or money worries. Then arrived the slow replies to my messages regarding ceremony matters. I'd forward choices for food providers, and he'd answer much later with merely appears good or whatever you prefer. When I inquired if all was fine, he'd claim he was simply occupied at his building firm, which had accepted some large jobs. It seemed logical. The previous 30 days, he began hanging out more with his job pal Paul. They'd have drinks post-shift or view matches at Paul's residence. Again, nothing odd, just happening more often. When he'd return, he appeared detached, glancing at his device more frequently and being less warm. I attempted chatting with my closest pal Lena about it. She proposed nerves before the big day and advised we arrange an evening out to rekindle. So the prior weekend, I booked a table at this fresh Mediterranean spot in the city center, wore a lovely outfit not overly elegant, just an item I hadn't donned recently, and even purchased Dominic's preferred lager to have ready in the cooler. The evening out was a fiasco. He appeared preoccupied during the meal, hardly participating in chat. When I raised completing our post-ceremony trip arrangements, he unleashed the shock. He wasn't confident if he was prepared for everything, not merely the trip but the ceremony, the union, all of it. I was shocked. 5 years as a pair, 8 months promised, and now he wasn't confident. When I pushed, he cited talks with Paul about how union alters stuff and mentioned Paul's siblings' chaotic separation. The exchange rapidly intensified, with me attempting not to create a commotion in the eatery while sensing like my universe was crumbling. We scarcely ate our main courses. The drive back was quiet, heavy with strain. At our home, he avoided additional discussion, stating he required time to reflect before crashing on the sofa. The following dawn was agonizingly uncomfortable. We navigated around one another like unfamiliar people in a rental. He noted gathering with Paul and some job mates for midday meal to see the match at the Old Bolt, the athletics tavern in the city. I was too mentally exhausted to dispute. A couple hours later, Lena phoned and persuaded me to leave the home. We went for drinks, and I poured out all. Lena heard attentively, proposing that perhaps Dominic was merely going through standard anxiety before the big day. After drinks, we strolled through a big-box store without aim, my typical tension relief pursuit. I purchased some unneeded cushions and fresh cleanser because shopping healing is still healing, isn't it? By late afternoon, I felt more composed and chose to go back. I was driving into our home area when I received a message from Kyle, one of Dominic's colleagues I'd encountered at the firm holiday gathering. The note inquired if I was all right, noting that things turned strange at the Old Bolt. I rang Kyle rather than messaging back. He sounded uneasy at first, hesitant to give particulars, with some urging he eventually disclosed what occurred. The fellows had been teasing Dominic about ceremony organizing, and when Paul inquired if he was prepared to commit to one person eternally, Dominic voiced uncertainties about the ceremony schedule. When Paul inquired what was stopping him, Dominic, who was evidently intoxicated, uttered something like if you looked nicer I'd be more thrilled about committing. Then he chuckled it off as if it was humorous. Kyle said he and some other fellows challenged Dominic on the remark, but Dominic just became protective and said they couldn't accept a jest. I remained in my vehicle weeping for 20 minutes following that call. The guy I cared for over 5 years, who I believed cared for me, had openly jested about my looks being the cause he was unsure about committing. When I eventually entered, Dominic was unconscious on the sofa, still dressed from before. The home reeked of old alcohol. I took Beans into the sleeping area with me and secured the entrance. The next dawn, I awoke to the aroma of brew and meat, Dominic's usual regret meal. He appeared with a hangover and timid, obviously hoping food would fix things. When I challenged him about what Kyle had disclosed, his expression dropped. He promptly tried to minimize it, asserting he was intoxicated and foolish. According to him, the fellows were mocking him about being restricted, and he'd uttered something silly to quiet them. His excuse of males being males only worsened things. We debated how he could embarrass me before his pals, with him asserting that wasn't his aim. He attempted to clarify that he was tense about ceremony expenses and stress, but I couldn't move past the reality that he'd used my looks as the ending to a harsh jest. I couldn't remain in the home with him. I seized my bag and headed for Eric's residence. My sibling has always been my secure haven during tough periods. When I disclosed what occurred, he was enraged, prepared to challenge Dominic personally. I succeeded in soothing him, clarifying that I merely required distance and a spot to remain while sorting things. Throughout the day, Dominic kept messaging regrets and pleas to return and discuss. I answered only once, stating I required time. I phoned an ill-to job on the next day, unable to deal with handling calls at the medical office while acting like all was normal. Around 9 in the morning the next day, I received a ring from Valerie, Dominic's mother. We've always gotten along nicely. She's been more encouraging of our bond than my own parent, who resides in a southern state with spouse number 3. She sounded distressed, saying Dominic had rung her the prior evening and there was something crucial I required to learn. She inquired if we could gather somewhere to discuss, and that's where I am currently, sitting in my vehicle outside the drink spot where I'm supposed to gather with Valerie in 15 minutes, pondering what else there could possibly be to learn and if my 5-year bond is entirely finished. I never imagined I'd be composing this entry. I keep glancing at my commitment jewelry, pondering if I should have noticed this approaching. Was I unaware, or did things truly alter this abruptly? Should I listen to Valerie? What could she possibly disclose that would make any of this acceptable? First revision. First, thanks to all for the massive encouragement on my initial entry. I didn't anticipate thousands of replies. I attempted to read as many as I could between weeping episodes and tension, snacking the backup cookies from my siblings' storage. For those inquiring, yes, I gathered with Valerie, Dominic's mother, and I'll reach that at the conclusion of this revision. A lot has occurred in the recent 2 days, and I'm still handling all. After composing on the next day, I phoned an ill-to job again. My supervisor was comprehending. I've only used 2 ill days in the past 12 months, and apparently I sounded terrible on the line. I spent most of the morning in Eric's extra space, a storage area, browsing through your replies and attempting to collect my ideas. Around midday, Lena arrived during her midday break with food from that eatery near the medical facility where she works. I hadn't consumed much since the weekend, so even though I wasn't starving, I forced myself to consume a few mouthfuls. Lena softly reminded me that I couldn't dodge Dominic eternally. We resided together, had combined finances, and eventually would need to discuss. She was correct. Obviously, I couldn't conceal at my siblings' residence forever, especially since Eric's partner was arriving for evening meal that evening. The last thing I wanted was to be the sad extra person at their Mexican night. After Lena departed, I washed, borrowed one of Eric's sweaters, don't criticize, it was soothing, and drove back to my home. The entire trip there I practiced what I wanted to express. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to weep. I was going to be composed and adult and obtain answers. When I drove into our parking area, I noticed Dominic's vehicle was there. He should have been at job. My belly twisted as I ascended the steps to our upper-level unit. I unlocked the entrance to find him on the sofa in casual clothes, appearing like he hadn't rested, surrounded by marriage organizing folders that I'd assembled over the past 8 months. Beans was nestled next to him, the little betrayer. He seemed surprised and relieved to see me. When I inquired why he wasn't at job, he noted taking private time. He'd apparently been examining all the marriage arrangements, trying to figure out how he ruined so badly. I stayed standing by the entrance, not prepared to sit beside him, and told him that examining marriage arrangements wasn't going to repair what he'd expressed. What followed was a lengthy, tough exchange. He regretted again for the tavern remark, calling it unforgivable and asserting he didn't even believe it. When I inquired why he would express something he didn't believe, he clarified he was attempting to appear impressive before his pals, reply that only made me more furious. I raised his remarks at meal before the tavern event, reminding him that he'd voiced uncertainties about our ceremony even when not drinking. He admitted to feeling tense about several things: a job task lagging, Paul's continual union nightmare tales, and worry about our ceremony funds. But instead of discussing these concerns with me, he kept everything inside until it burst in the worst possible manner. As our exchange advanced, he disclosed something fresh: worries about becoming his dad. Dominic seldom discussed his father, who departed when he was 12 after having a romance with a job associate and relocating to a western state to begin a new household. Although Dominic had always claimed it didn't impact him much, he now admitted that he worried about having some inherited tendency to betray or leave his household. I noted that he wasn't his father and that inherited traits don't determine bond choices. His reply was revealing. He pondered if he could really vow eternal when eternal seemed so impossible based on what he'd seen growing up. When I inquired if he'd discussed these worries with anyone else, he paused before admitting he'd been chatting with Kyle occasionally. Apparently they'd become closer since Kyle joined the firm and Kyle had gone through some bond issues too. I linked this to why Kyle had rung me about the tavern event. He already knew about Dominic's uncertainties. The exchange took another tough turn when I inquired exactly what Dominic had been sensing. His answer was painfully truthful, frightened, overloaded, and unsure about Union despite caring for me. He clarified that he kept thinking about how his parents appeared joyful until suddenly they weren't, and he feared creating the same circumstance with us. I inquired why he hadn't shared these sensations sooner. He claimed he was afraid I'd think he didn't care for me enough. The irony wasn't lost on me. By concealing his worries, he'd created exactly the circumstance he was trying to avoid. When I questioned whether his jest about my looks came from a real place of lack of attraction, he'd always found me appealing. He referenced our initial encounter at the home warming event, mentioning specific details about my blue top and his awful game skills. According to him, the remark came from uncertainty and a misguided attempt to seem in charge before his pals rather than appearing caught. As we continued chatting, I asked a vital question: were his uncertainties about Union in general or about committing to me specifically? His pause before answering told me all. He finally admitted that while his worries were mainly about Union and commitment, part of him pondered if we were suitable for each other long term. This hurt more than the looks remark. 5 years as a pair, and he was still pondering if we were suitable for each other. When I pushed for details, he mentioned how we both altered since our early 20s, my increased need for organizing versus my former impulsiveness, his forsaken goals of launching his own enterprise. Although I noted that development and alteration are normal in bonds, he questioned whether we developed together or separately. By this point, I felt mentally exhausted. I told him I required time away to handle everything: his public embarrassment, his concealed uncertainties, and now his unsure about our match. He begged for us to resolve it together, offering to try counseling or pair therapy, but I stayed firm about needing distance. As I was about to pack more items, he noted my device had been vibrating. I checked and saw 3 missed rings from Valerie. With everything occurring, I'd completely forgotten our planned drink gathering. When I mentioned this to Dominic, his expression changed to puzzlement then worry. He inquired what his mother wanted to discuss. And I clarified she'd rung sobbing the prior morning saying she needed to discuss something important after his weekend evening call to her. His reaction was revealing. The color left his face, and he wouldn't meet my gaze. When I inquired what he told her, he vaguely mentioned their disagreement and his uncertainties, but his avoidance made me doubtful. When pushed further, he said it wasn't his place to clarify and suggested I should hear whatever it was from his mother directly. I stepped away to ring Valerie back. She answered promptly, worried when I hadn't appeared for our gathering. I clarified I was at the home talking with Dominic. She mentioned having something important to disclose and suggested gathering right away. Her tone sounded odd when I mentioned being with Dominic, further increasing my doubt that there was something significant I didn't know. After arranging to gather Valerie in 30 minutes, I challenged Dominic again, inquiring what his mother knew that I didn't. He finally looked up, his expression a mix of remorse and acceptance. He said there was something he should have disclosed myself and suggested I talk to his mother, offering to be gone when I returned if that's what I wanted. I quickly packed enough items for 7 days along with personal items and my computer. At the entrance, Dominic said he cared for me, but I responded that sometimes care isn't sufficient. On my way to gather Valerie, Karina, Dominic's sibling, rang. She was clearly worried, inquiring what was occurring between Dominic and me. She mentioned hearing from Paul about the tavern event and noted that Dominic wasn't responding her messages while their mother seemed distressed. When I clarified I was heading to gather Valerie, Karina seemed startled and inquired if the gathering was about Mia. The name struck me like a vehicle. What about Mia? I inquired. Karina's shocked reaction and quick retreat told me she'd accidentally disclosed something important. She regretted and urged me to listen to Valerie out, refusing to clarify further despite my urging. As I drove into the drink spot parking area, I spotted Valerie already waiting at a table by the glass. Her eyes were red-edged and swollen. Whatever she was about to disclose, I had a feeling it was going to alter everything. My device vibrated with a message as I walked toward her table. It was from Dominic. Whatever my mother discloses, please remember that I do care for you. I just got frightened and made awful errors. I'll understand if you can't pardon me. I put my device away, took a deep inhale, and sat down across from Valerie. Second revision. Thanks to all for the encouragement on my prior entries. Reading your replies has been both soothing and intense. I haven't been able to answer many, but please know I've read them and value the guidance. I'm composing this from a new spot, Lena's home. After gathering with Valerie the prior day, I couldn't face going back to Eric's or our home. Lena has a fold-out bed that's slightly more comfy than Eric's storage area bed, plus her feline pepper doesn't criticize me for sobbing. Into my breakfast at 2 in the morning. So the gathering with Valerie, where do I even begin? The drink spot was busy for a weekday afternoon. Some local school had just ended sessions and students with computers occupied most spots. Valerie had managed to grab a corner seat, the kind with tall backs that create at least the illusion of seclusion. She looked different than the last time I'd seen her at our monthly household meal 3 weeks back. Her usually flawless hairstyle was slightly messy, and she wasn't wearing any cosmetics. In the 5 years I've known her, I've never seen Valerie without at least eye makeup and lip color. She's not conceited. It's just her habit, like how some people can't begin their day without brew. When I arrived, she stood to embrace me. She smelled like those floral fabric softeners she always uses. I ordered a plain brew even though what I really wanted was one of those sweet drinks with extra topping. Somehow it felt wrong to order something lighthearted for this exchange. After some uncomfortable casual chat, Valerie got to the point. Dominic had rung her weekend evening in a complete mental breakdown. While she acknowledged his worries about commitment and becoming his father were genuine, there was something much more immediate causing his actions. Mia. I nearly choked on my brew. Mia, the new task manager at Dominic's firm, the woman he'd mentioned a few times in passing. As Valerie clarified while nervously tearing a tissue into tiny bits, Dominic had developed emotions for Mia over the past few months. Nothing bodily had occurred, at least according to what Dominic told his mother. But there was an emotional link that had him questioning everything about our bond. I sat there trying to handle this information, feeling like the drink spot was slanting sideways. While Valerie continued chatting, I was mentally linking points, building a schedule. Mia had started at Dominic's firm around the start of the year. I'd met her briefly at the firm holiday gathering in spring. By then Dominic had already been acting different, more detached, glancing at his device constantly, spending more time with job pals. What I dismissed as tension from his large task now looked like something else entirely. When I inquired Valerie why she was disclosing this instead of protecting her son, her eyes filled with tears. The similarity to her own union collapse became clear as she shared more details. Before Dominic's father departed for a western state with his job associate, there had been months of detachment, hurtful remarks, and invented disputes, all designed to create separation rather than admit the truth. She didn't want to see history repeat itself with me left unaware while Dominic took the easy way out. The remark at the tavern suddenly made more sense, not just intoxicated foolishness, but a subconscious attempt to ruin our bond so he wouldn't have to make the hard decision himself. We chatted for over 60 minutes. Valerie shared more about her own experience, how she'd tried to save her union even after learning about the romance, how she'd blamed herself for not being sufficient. Before we parted ways in the parking area, she said something that's been repeating in my head ever since. The toughest lesson I learned was that you can't force someone to select you. They either do or they don't. And anything in between is just postponing the unavoidable. I sat in my vehicle for a long time afterward, staring at my device. There were 3 new messages from Dominic, all variations of regrets and I care for you, but not a single mention of Mia, still concealing the full truth. Instead of answering him, I rang Lena and inquired if I could stay at her place. She didn't pause or inquire questions, just said she was already preparing the fold-out bed and offered to get evening meal on her way home. That's the kind of pal everyone deserves during a crisis. I finally messaged Dominic back. I know about Mia. Don't contact me again until you're ready to disclose the complete truth. I'll be collecting more of my things the next day while you're at job. Then I blocked his number. Not forever, just for the evening. I needed distance to think without his clarifications or excuses. On the drive to Lena's, Karina rang. The exchange confirmed what Valerie had disclosed and added another layer. She had overheard Dominic and Paul discussing the circumstance the prior week. She'd challenged her brother and made him vow to be truthful with me after the weekend. Clearly he'd failed to follow through on that vow. What surprised me most was Karina's steadfast encouragement despite being Dominic's sibling. She made it clear she was on my side in the circumstance. The relief I felt was huge. I'd been worried about losing not just Dominic, but his entire household who had become my household over the years. Lena's home was exactly what I needed that evening. A neutral area where I could just be without clarifying myself. We ate meal on her sitting area floor. Her center table was covered with documents from her virtual class. While watching a cooking contest neither of us really paid attention to, the ordinary normalcy of it was like a rescue device in the middle of my mental storm. After Lena went to rest, I stayed awake browsing through images on my device. 5 years of recollections with Dominic, trips, celebrations, random photos on regular days. Our commitment images showed us smiling like we'd won a prize. I was making mental plans for the next day, going to the home while Dominic was at job, packing more things, maybe talking to the property owner about ending our contract, when my device vibrated with a message from an unknown number. "Margot, this is Mia. I know you blocked Dominic. Can we gather the next day? There's more to the tale that you should know, just the two of us." I stared at the message for a long time, my heart racing. What more could there possibly be, and why would this woman want to disclose me directly? After what felt like 60 minutes, but was probably only minutes, I typed a response. Where and when? Third revision. First, thanks to all for the massive encouragement on my prior entries. I've been reading your replies during restless nights, and they've helped more than you know. For those inquiring how I'm doing, I'm enduring. Some moments are easier than others. The gathering with Mia occurred, and it went nothing like I anticipated. We gathered at this small morning meal spot near the green area, neutral area, I guess. When I arrived, she was already there, anxiously browsing through her device. She looked different than I recalled from the firm party, less refined, more ordinary somehow. Her hair was tied back in a disheveled knot, and she wore little cosmetics. What surprised me immediately was how uneasy she seemed. If she'd been having some secret emotional romance with my partner, shouldn't she have been more assured? Instead, she kept fiddling with her brew cup, avoiding gaze. The exchange revealed two major surprises. First, Mia had no idea Dominic had developed emotions for her until Paul mentioned it casually the prior week. According to her, she and Dominic had worked closely on a task, occasionally messaging about job after hours, but nothing that crossed any boundaries from her viewpoint. She'd never teased with him or encouraged anything beyond friendship. She showed me their message history, mostly job stuff, occasional funny images. Nothing romantic or improper. She even had a partner of 3 years who sometimes joined their group for after-work drinks. The second disclosure was about Paul. Apparently he'd been deliberately stirring things up. Mia had overheard him at job encouraging Dominic to explore his choices before committing, specifically mentioning her as someone who understands Dominic better than I do. She clarified that Paul had been telling everyone at job that Dominic was having doubts about the ceremony, making jests about him being restricted and missing out on his independence. By the end of our gathering, I felt oddly composed. Mia wasn't the antagonist I'd imagined. She was just a spectator caught in manipulation and Dominic's frailty. Before we parted ways, she said something that stuck with me. "You seem like someone who knows their value. Don't let anyone make you question it." I left that gathering with a fresh viewpoint and a plan. This wasn't just about Dominic and me anymore. It was about Paul's harmful influence, Dominic's household history, and where I fit into all of it. I messaged Karina afterward inquiring if she'd help arrange a household gathering at her home, neutral area, since I wasn't ready to be alone with Dominic yet. She agreed promptly. That brings me to the prior day's evening meal. Karina had set everything up in her small but warm home. She'd ordered food from that Mediterranean spot near her building, nothing elaborate, just noodles and greens. Valerie arrived first, then Paul. Karina had insisted he participate, and finally Dominic, who looked like he hadn't rested in days. The first 20 minutes were torturous. We all sat around Karina's eating table, moving food around our dishes, making odd casual chat about the climate and Karina's new center table. The big issue in the room was practically taking food off our dishes, but no one wanted to be the first to acknowledge it. Finally, Valerie broke the quiet by stating directly that we weren't there for a social event, but to address what had been occurring and find a way ahead. That opened the gates. I shared what I'd learned from Mia, watching Paul's face carefully as I spoke. The way his expression shifted from puzzlement to protectiveness told me all. He tried to interrupt, claiming he was just watching out for his pal, but Karina stopped him promptly. Dominic mostly sat quietly, staring at his hardly touched food. When directly spoken to, he admitted that Mia had just been kind, but he'd built it into something else because he was frightened of becoming his dad. Valerie noticeably reacted to that remark. When I raised the jest at the tavern, Dominic looked truly remorseful. He admitted it had nothing to do with Mia. It was just him being timid. Paul was teasing him about being controlled, and instead of defending our bond, he'd said something terrible to seem impressive. According to Dominic, it was never about my looks. Paul tried to dismiss it all as just male chat, but Karina reminded everyone that Dominic and I were supposed to commit in 3 months. That simple statement, the reminder of our quickly approaching ceremony date, hit me like a strike. The invitations had been sent, payments made. My gown was hanging in Lena's spare storage waiting for final changes. That's when I quietly said I didn't think the ceremony was occurring anymore. The room went quiet. Dominic started to object, but I stopped him. I clarified how I'd spent the last 7 days trying to understand how we got here. What I'd realized was that this wasn't just about Mia or that jest or even Paul's harmful influence. This was about Dominic not being truthful with me or himself. I told them how I'd ignored the signs for months, his lack of interest in ceremony organizing, his increased time with Paul, his emotional detachment. I'd made excuses because it was easier than challenging the truth. But I deserve someone who was sure about me, someone who didn't need a household intervention to figure out their sensations. Paul made a sarcastic remark about me being overdramatic, which earned him simultaneous quiet responses from both Valerie and Karina. Dominic insisted he was sure about caring for me, just frightened of ruining everything I noted that he already had. The exchange continued for hours. There were tears, intense words especially between Karina and Paul, and difficult truths. We revisited old injuries and uncovered new ones. Around late evening, when everyone was mentally tired, we reached the unavoidable conclusion. The ceremony was cancelled. Our 5-year bond had reached its end. It wasn't a yelling dispute or a dramatic departure. It was a shared recognition that something basic had broken between us. Trust maybe. It could be rebuilt eventually, but not in time for a fall ceremony. Not with Mia still working at Dominic's firm. Not with the remnant of that jest still lingering between us. Karina drove me back to Lena's spot afterward, assuring me this didn't alter my bond with her or Valerie. According to her, I was still household to them regardless of what occurred with Dominic. When I got back to Lena's home, I sat on the fold-out bed in the dark, letting the reality flow over me. 5 years finished, ceremony cancelled, future unknown. I didn't weep right away. Instead, I made a list in the notes program on my device. Call location to cancel, payment probably lost, return jewelry, contact attendees, move out of home, change bond status on social platforms. It was past 2 in the morning when Lena came out from her sleeping area. She'd heard me arrive and wanted to check if I was all right. When I told her the ceremony was cancelled, she simply sat beside me on the fold-out and put her arm around my shoulders. We sat like that until dawn, not saying much, just being in the oddness of my new reality. This morning I awoke to a message from Dominic inquiring if we could gather to discuss practical matters, the home contract, separating our money, what to do with the furnishings we purchased together, so mature, so conclusive. I also had a message from Eric inquiring when he should come over to help pack my things, my sibling always useful, and one from my parent who'd somehow heard through the network, probably from one of my relatives who follows Karina on social, and wanted to know if she should cancel her travel for the ceremony. The jewelry feels heavy on my finger now. I've been turning it absent-mindedly. A nervous habit I didn't realize I had. It's a simple style, a circular gem in a light metal setting, nothing showy or detailed. Dominic had chosen it because it was traditional like our bond. The irony isn't lost on me. I rang the location this morning. The organizer was sympathetic but firm. The payment is non-returnable this close to the date. $8,000 lost. Money we'd saved for over 12 months. Reducing trips and new outfits and meals out. The useful side of me feels the loss. The emotional side doesn't care about money right now. Karina messaged that she'd found an image taker who might be willing to move our payment to another event in the future. Valerie offered to help contact household members about the cancellation to spare me the uncomfortable exchanges. Small acts of kindness in the aftermath. Paul unsurprisingly sent a non-regret message about how these things occur for a reason and how I'd find someone better matched eventually. I removed it without answering. Mia sent a short message expressing her sorrow about the circumstance and assuring me again that nothing occurred between them. I believe her oddly enough. She seems like unintended damage in this confusion. A convenient focus for Dominic's worries and Paul's control. The hardest part is the ordinary reminders, the ceremony organizing folder still sitting in my bag, the shared music list we've been building for the reception, the post-ceremony research file on my computer. Little pieces of a future that no longer is. Lena suggested I take a mental well-being day from job, but I decided to go in. Sitting at home browsing through forums and overanalyzing everything seemed worse than the distraction of handling calls and filing claims. My job mates have been kindly normal. Either they don't know yet, or they're politely acting not to notice my swollen eyes and missing commitment jewelry. I'm gathering Dominic the next day at a drink spot to exchange keys and discuss the home. He's agreed to move out since my name is on the contract, and he can stay with his relative temporarily, another useful exchange in the process of taking apart a bond. Part of me still can't believe this is occurring. Last month we were debating party tunes and tasting dessert options. Now we're dividing up cooking tools and deciding who keeps the gaming system. I keep thinking about something Valerie said at the meal. Endings are rarely neat or ideal. Most of the time they're chaotic and sorrowful and complex. She would know. She rebuilt her life after Dominic's father departed, raised 2 children alone. Found joy again eventually. Looking at her now, you'd never guessed she went through something so painful. Maybe there's hope in that. For now I'm taking it one day at a time. The next day I'll handle the home and money. Next week I'll start looking for my own spot. The future beyond that is unclear, but it exists. Karina just messaged to ask if I want to gather for brew this weekend. She mentioned that her household pal Ken, an older man who's known their household forever, offered his holiday home if I need a escape to clear my head. The encouragement from Dominic's household is unexpected but deeply valued. I haven't decided if I'll take Ken up on his offer. Part of me wants to flee somewhere quiet to handle everything. Another part knows I need my encouragement system right now. Lena with her useful kindness, Eric with his protective sibling energy, even Valerie and Karina with their complex loyalty. What I do know is that I won't be checking my ceremony countdown program anymore, won't be saving party decoration ideas or practicing a new signature with Dominic's last name. That future is finished, and while I don't know what comes next, I'm starting to believe there will be something. Last revision. It feels odd to be composing this final revision for my new home. It's been 3 months since the household meal that ended my commitment. 3 months of putting my life back together in ways I never anticipated. Some of you have sent messages asking for a revision, so here it is, the positive, the negative, and the surprising. First, the useful stuff. Dominic moved out of our shared home within 7 days of our separation. Eric and Lena helped me pack up his things while he was at job, leaving them neatly marked in the sitting area for him to collect. It was unreal separating 5 years of shared existence into his and mine. The brew maker he'd gotten for his birthday, the cover I'd bought on our weekend trip to that small hill area, the framed images we'd hung on every wall. The home felt empty afterward. Like a stage setup rather than a residence. I lasted 2 more weeks there before the contract manager agreed to let me end the agreement with an extra month's payment. It was worth the money to escape the shadow of our bond that lingered in every room. Finding a new spot was harder than anticipated. The rental market is tough right now, and my budget as a single person is considerably smaller. I ended up in a smaller single sleeping area across the city. Further from job, but with a small outdoor area where I've started growing plants in cheap pots. The green herb keeps failing, but the fresh herb is succeeding against all odds. I choose to see that as meaningful. Money-wise, it's been in change. Our shared costs were suddenly all on me. Vehicle coverage, online services, even food shopping seem more costly when you're preparing for one. I've become that person who uses discounts and buys generic. Tracks costs in a document, and thinks twice before ordering delivery. Adult stuff I never thought I'd have to learn at 29. The ceremony providers were surprisingly comprehending. The location kept our payment, but sent a kind note hoping I'd find joy. The flower provider returned half our payment despite their no-return policy. The music provider recommended his sibling who works at a counseling center, an unexpected but considerate gesture. The commitment jewelry sits in my storage drawer in its original container. Dominic said I should keep it or sell it, that it was bad luck for him to take it back. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. Some days I forget it's there. Other days I open the container and stare at it pondering how something so small could have represented such big vows. Social platforms was its own special difficulty. I waited 2 weeks before changing my bond status, dreading the flood of questions. When I finally did it at 2 in the morning on a weekday, the alerts came in anyway. Well-intentioned pals with their what occurred messages, distant relatives offering thoughts, former schoolmates I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly messaging with false concern that felt more like nosiness. I posted a brief unclear statement about shared decisions and requesting seclusion, then silenced alerts and tossed my device across the sofa. Later I posted a single image of my new home keys with the caption "Fresh Starts." It got fewer approvals than my commitment announcement, but felt more real somehow. Now about Dominic. We've spoken a few times since the separation, mostly about useful matters, correspondence that came to the wrong location, the shared online storage we forgot to separate, returning a borrowed cooking device to a sibling. Each exchange has been polite but tense, like known people forced to make casual chat in a lift. He's still working at the same firm. Still pals with Paul, though Karina tells me they've had some disagreement recently. Still residing at his relative's spot. According to the network, aka Karina. The circumstance with Mia got uncomfortable after our separation. She requested a move to a different group and has been distant toward him since learning the full tale. The biggest surprise came last month when Dominic messaged asking if we could gather. We hadn't seen each other in person since the key swap at the home, and part of me was curious what he wanted. We gathered at a drink spot near my new spot. Neutral area with plenty of people, as Lena half-humorously suggested. He looked different, slimmer with darker areas under his eyes, wearing a top I didn't recognize. The first 10 minutes were awkward casual chat about job and climate. Then he pulled out a notebook. "I've been seeing someone," he said, and my heart did a strange little jump before he clarified. "A counselor, I mean." The notebook was part of his counseling. Daily thoughts on patterns and actions he wanted to alter. He'd been examining his bond with his father, his friendship with Paul, and the way he treated me. He didn't ask for pardon or reunion. He just wanted me to know he was working on himself. "I should have done this years ago," he admitted. "Maybe things would have been different." It was the most aware I'd ever seen him, and I found myself genuinely hoping counseling would help him. Not for my sake, that opportunity has passed, but because carrying around that much unresolved household pain seemed tiring. Before we parted ways, he mentioned he'd heard I was still close with his mother and sibling. I'm glad, he said. They need good people in their lives. That's been one of the oddest parts of this separation, maintaining bonds with Dominic's household while disconnecting from him. Valerie messages me weekly, usually sending humorous images or updates about her outdoor area. Karina and I have morning meal every other weekend at this small eatery halfway between our homes. They've been careful not to put me in awkward positions or share too much about Dominic, respecting the limits I've set. As for me personally, I'd like to say I've had some deep realization that I've found myself through this pain. The reality is more chaotic. Some days I feel free, relieved that I didn't commit to someone who could hurt me so thoughtlessly. Other days, usually when my water system acts up or I can't reach something on the high shelf that Dominic would have grabbed for me, I miss the useful comforts of partnership. I've started counseling too, not because of the separation specifically, but because it made me realize how much I'd sacrificed myself in that bond, how many warnings I'd ignored because they came wrapped in the ease of habit, how much of myself I'd set aside to make room for Dominic's needs and uncertainties. My counselor suggested I reclaim some parts of myself that got lost along the way. I've resumed trekking on weekend mornings, something I'd stopped doing because Dominic always complained about early rises on off days. Committing again feels like a far concept, though. My job mates have started suggesting about setting me up with this great person they know. I'm not prepared. Maybe in a few more months, maybe longer. Right now I'm still learning how to be comfy in my own company. The most surprising came from what should have been the saddest task, canceling our post-ceremony trip. We booked a 10-day journey to the shore, renting a small house with a platform overlooking the liquid, non-returnable of course. For weeks I ignored the reminder in my schedule, unable to face losing that payment too. Then Lena suggested something bold, take the trip anyway by myself. You've never traveled solo, she pointed out. Maybe it's time. The idea scared me at first. 10 days alone in a romantic house meant for two. It sounded like the setup for a sad small film, but the more I thought about it, the more attractive it became. I could wake up when I wanted, explore without sacrifice, read an entire volume in one sitting if I felt like it. So that's where I'm headed next week, to a post-ceremony house solo. I've packed 3 books, downloaded some audio shows, and spent on a new water outfit that I chose entirely for ease rather than how it looked to someone else. My parent thinks I'm insane. Eric offered to come with me for part of the time. I declined. Karina suggested I download a committing program just to see who's out there. Maybe, but probably not. I don't know what I'll find on this post-ceremony. Maybe clarity, maybe more questions, definitely some skin burn knowing my luck with protection. The other day I was food shopping when our tune came on over the store sounds. 3 months ago it would have sent me hiding in the cold section fighting back tears. This time I just felt a slight pain, like pressing on a mark that's mostly mended, advancement not ideal. I'm not going to pretend I've got everything sorted. My new home's wash has mysterious heat changes. I failed another green plant yesterday. I still occasionally grab my device to message Dominic about something funny before remembering we don't do that anymore. Quote, endings are rarely neat or ideal. They're chaotic and sorrowful. Quote, you can't force someone to select you. They either do or don't. If you enjoyed this tale, hit that like button and subscribe to Reddit Gossip Daily for more gripping stories.